And then things sort of slowed down a little bit after that fight was lost. But I'm hoping we're going to see an upswing here as more people realize that, wow, we're in this stage where something could actually happen here. And we have a movement where people are becoming, legitimately very scared about some of these chemical contaminants in the environment, and they're starting to make their voices heard politically.
So now, as opposed to 20 years ago, when you almost we were almost able to get atrazine out, do you feel like more people are aware of this issue now, or have they gone back to sleep?
That's a good question. And one I don't really have a good answer to. I would say you know, back in the early 2000s, I was not in this arena, so I can't speak from experience, but um, um, anyone who knows about atrazine right now is very into getting rid of it. I think the problem we have is that there's so much to keep track of, so many chemicals, most of which names we can't even pronounce. And so I think the biggest barrier right now is just lack of awareness.
With regard to glyphosate kind of being the poster child for toxic chemicals, is there anything that we can learn with how that was brought to the public that we could use to have other chemicals like atrazine brought to the public's awareness?
Yeah, I think Roundup, the brand name has just been around for so long, and so many people have used it, and so everyone knew about it. The commercials were on TV all the time. It was the brand name. I mean, a lot of people don't even know about glyphosate. They just know about Roundup and its harms, and don't even know that the main ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate. So it's not necessarily that glyphosate's a household name. It's just that the brand name Roundup has really um, just people recognize it and they know it. And they're like, oh yeah, my dad used to use that when I was a child, or whatever the case may be. And then of course the litigation, the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma class action litigation really brought it to the forefront in a way that nothing else could. So, I think as the same with atrazine, there was a lot more knowledge about it, a lot more awareness of it when it was going through the litigation, and there were the media stories and the big $100 million settlement. People were like, whoa, this stuff is being used out there. But when it's not, kind of in your face all the time, which is what happens when these successful class action litigations happen, it's just kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Um, is regenerative farming something that is feasible in order to compete against the use of these types of toxic chemicals? And is anyone actually doing regenerative farming at a large scale, to your knowledge, that can kind of displace the use of these chemicals?
Sure. I mean, this is a little bit outside of my expertise area, but the problem I see with regenerative farming is it has no real definition. With organic, you know what you're getting because there's a definition, there's a very strong label. With regenerative farming, what we see is the same with for folks who are familiar with integrated pest management, or IPM. These are terms that were sort of developed as a way of promoting good agricultural practices, can very easily be co-opted by big agriculture to prolong the status quo. And the problem is, if there's no strong definition of what that means, then it's easy to co-opt. And so what we see is with integrated pest management, which started out as a great movement to reduce pesticide use, has been so watered down and so co-opted by industry that it's basically meaningless at this point. I don't know if the same thing is happening with regenerative agriculture, but I know there are efforts to try and weaken what that actually means so that the status quo can move forward. So I think regenerative farming can absolutely be done to scale. It needs to be done smarter. It's going to require a ton of infrastructure investment. And I think the only way to get that done is to get the US government to to fund these transitions, because it's hard to transition from a pesticide intensive practice to a regenerative practice. It's not easy. And so if we can get regenerative to actually mean something, to define what exactly that means, and then get some economic investment and some buy-in from the agricultural community to move in that direction, I think that's great. And I hope we see that happening.
So it sounds like the term regenerative is a lot like, has the potential to be a lot like greenwashing or like cage-free, where it doesn't really have a that people think it does, and therefore makes people feel good without actually changing anything on the large scale. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything can be greenwashed. And I think when you're, things like climate friendly farming or something like that has already been greenwashed, and so it's just it's important moving forward to really stick to your guns and be like, what does regenerative actually mean? How can we do it? And how can we prevent corporate agriculture from taking it over and from diluting it to something meaningless, so they can sell their products and to a consumer community that is more educated.
How hard is it to get out of the atrazine out of the environment, so that if you wanted to have an area that has been contaminated cleaned up, can you just leave it there? Will it break down? Do you have to remediate the soil?
It takes a while. It's a pretty long lasting one. I think they did a study in Europe that they were still finding atrazine in groundwater 20 years after it was banned. It's not like DDT. It's not going to be around 50 years after it was applied. I think the big problem is the volume we're applying it at, and it's constant year after year after year after year. So if we cut off the spigot, so to speak, things are just going to get better. It may take more time than we want, and that's unfortunate. Might be a decade until we get to a place where we're not really detecting it all that much anymore. But the first step has to be turning off the tap, so we can at least try and see whether remediation in the short term is possible.
And so we just have about a minute or so left. To leave on a high note, what gives you hope in this regard?
People care about their health. People care about the environment, and they're starting to scream and yell about it. To see the Republican Party, start to talk about clean air and clean water, as hollow as I think those words are, it's very different than what the Republican Party has been saying in the last 50 years or so. So just that itself is really important. And I think what we're seeing with, the Make America Healthy Again movement is that people are fed up. People are scared. People are frustrated that they have to do all this research just to make sure that they're not getting anything nasty in themselves. And so I think, moving forward, capturing that anger and that frustration, and just showing the industry that the status quo, business as usual, it's not okay anymore. We got to change things, and we're going to make our voices heard, and we're going to vote. So I see hope in the future, but we're right now in a time and in an administration where I'm very worried about the short term, but I'm hopeful about the long term.
Great, thank you. If we can unmute the audience so they can share their appreciation for Nathan, please.
Thank you, Nathan.
I know, I've talked to him.
Thank you,
Great
Nathan.
information.
I've spoken to him today.
Thank
Thank you for
Uh-huh.
putting that
Thank you very
face.
much.